Tonight on Ukraine Today, situation on the battlefield. The occupiers are improving their camouflage and building up manpower for the offensive. How are Ukraine's defense forces responding? On the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe, the consequences of massive Russian strikes on Ukraine's critical infrastructure. A direct military clash between Russia and NATO. In Germany, officials believe this could happen within the next 2 to 3 years. Russia's shadow mail, how sanctioned goods are still entering Russia from the territory of the European Union without any problems. Unrest in China, how events inside the PRC could affect Russia's war against Ukraine. All this and more, right now. Hello, my name is Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit the like button and let's move to the news. We begin with the situation on the battlefield and then move on to Russia's massive strikes and other key developments through the Ukrainian perspective. To be honest, I had to mentally prepare myself for the next story you're about to hear. Don't get me wrong, I fully understand this is about war and human lives, but it is also about an occupier who tried to disguise himself as a penguin. Yes, you heard it right. Ukraine's defense forces eliminated such an individual at the front line. This clearly shows that the enemy is trying to improve its camouflage. More details on the battlefield situation in the report.
Russia is on fire. Oil refineries are under attack. Explosions were heard in the Krasnodar region. It was loud in temporarily occupied Luhansk as well. Residents heard the sounds of explosions. Later, a massive fire broke out at the local substation. The occupiers are also feeling the heat at the front. Ukrainian paratroopers, using drones, successfully struck an enemy tank and motor vehicles, and also destroyed occupiers and their shelter. Over the past day, there were 138 combat clashes recorded along the entire front line. Most of the assaults took place near Pokrovsk and Heliopol. Russian troops continue to advance in the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk direction.
In my opinion, the most problematic areas remain Lyman and Kostyantynivka. The occupiers have shifted their main focus to the issue of capturing the key industrial cities of the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. That's why the pressure is being applied both from the Lyman direction, meaning Siversky Lyman, and accordingly from Kostyantynivka. Assault groups of the occupiers are trying to gain a foothold in the urban environment of this settlement.
Meanwhile, a Czech company is supplying Ukraine with FPV drones based on a captured Russian UAV. It operates on fiber optics, making it immune to electronic warfare systems, and it's also 3 times cheaper than other models. A French company has also supplied UAVs capable of covering 500 kilometers and staying airborne for up to 5 hours.
In fact, what's happening is that the French defense industry is rolling out its technologies in the production of strike drones under real combat conditions. In other words, Ukraine's experience using UAVs on the front lines is an invaluable asset that our European partners simply do not have.
And while the whole world supports Ukraine, Putin continues to recruit new cannon fodder. The Russian military command has launched a large-scale campaign to recruit specialists for new unmanned systems units. However, behind the attractive promises of rear-line service lies the reality of replenishing infantry units that are suffering critical losses at the front.
The Russian Federation is limited in its ability to replenish its personnel. Despite the fact that the overall mobilization potential is around 20 million, Putin is in a panic about announcing even a partial, let alone a general mobilization, as this could lead to social upheaval in the Russian Federation. It should be noted that this situation with UAV operators is not unique.
And there's also a missile shortage in Russia. During the latest attack on Ukraine, among the debris were found both the newest experimental models and missiles literally manufactured at the beginning of 2026.
This indicates that the Russian military-industrial complex is essentially working straight off the assembly line, meaning there are no strategic stockpiles of munitions to speak of. In other words, this is an indicator of the Russian military-industrial complex, its inability to scale up the production of munitions, and accordingly, a sign that the Russian economy is currently unable to finance an active phase of combat operations in Ukraine.
Putin does not want to end the war and is not ready for compromise. According to the Times, the Russian dictator may use chemical weapons for mass destruction.
Over the past day, Russia has lost at least 820 occupiers killed and wounded. That brings total Russian losses since the start of the full-scale invasion to 1,235,880. In addition, over the last 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 1 Russian tank, 3 armored combat vehicles, 47 artillery systems, and dozens of other pieces of enemy military equipment. Meanwhile, the head of Russia's so-called General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, reported the alleged capture of Kupiansk-Vuzlovy. I can only conclude that the man has a very vivid imagination. Russian forces have not even approached the settlement. According to OSINT analysts, the distance from Kupiansk-Vuzlovy to Russian positions is about 10 kilometers. This is far from the first lie coming from Gerasimov, and definitely not the last. Russian forces carried out massive strikes on peaceful Ukrainian cities and towns. In Odessa, enemy attacks damaged residential buildings, educational institutions, a store, a construction site, and a critical infrastructure facility. At least 1 person was killed and dozens were injured. Some buildings now have holes straight through them, some with entire stairwells completely destroyed. Around 80% of Kharkiv city and the region were left without electricity after a Russian strike. An energy infrastructure facility and 2 schools were damaged. And that was not the end of it. Russian forces also struck critical infrastructure in the Lviv region. After the attack, heavy smoke was reported in the city of Brody. Schools have been temporarily closed, and residents are advised to tightly shut their windows and doors. Ukraine does not leave these attacks unanswered, but unlike Russian terrorists, Ukraine strictly follows the laws of war. More information has now emerged about Ukrainian Flamingo missiles striking a Russian constructor involved in the production of MiG and Sukhoi aircraft. Details in the report.
For the first time, analysts have released confirmation of a Flamingo strike on a contractor involved in the production of Su fighter jets in Russia. Back in the fall, all 4 out of 4 missiles bombed the Skif M plant in Belgorod.
The main area of application for our products is the aerospace industry. This enterprise is involved in aircraft and helicopter manufacturing, as well as other industries connected to flying vehicles. We have plans to significantly expand our production, currently supplying Germany, Africa, and Belgium.
In the Lipetsk region, the Energia plant, a manufacturer of chemical power sources, was hit hard. And in Novaya Adygea, it was a botched job. A Russian air defense missile hit an apartment building.
Rockets and vehicles are still moving, despite the disruption.
Something hit. All my windows were blown out with the glass. Something suddenly hit the ground.
As you can see, these are our houses. Cars, the market, everything's on fire.
After the strike on the CHP in Belgorod, there's another blackout. The governor doesn't know how to solve the problem and is urging residents to leave.
That's it. Everything. There's nothing in the whole city.
With the loss of heat and electricity, we will transport people to those municipalities that are able to accommodate such a number of people or move them to other regions. If possible, we send children to stay with the relatives.
But there are blackouts in Russia even in places where Ukrainian missiles don't reach. A state of emergency has been declared in the Murmansk region due to large-scale power outages. The power lines couldn't withstand the severe frost.
Meanwhile, some Russian cities are losing power without any external impact. In Murmansk and Severomorsk, the main naval base of the Northern Fleet, there has been a total collapse of the power supply. According to local residents, trolley buses have stopped running in parts of Murmansk, escalators in shopping centers aren't working, and elevators in apartment buildings are out of order. Traffic lights have gone out on the roads. There is absolutely no electricity.
Stores aren't open, nothing is working.
There should be electricity everywhere.
It's just everyone at home.
In Krasnodar Krai, it's also like Armageddon. There are absolutely no amenities of civilization, not even fuel to run generators.
The Belarusian apocalypse. No electricity, no water, nothing is working anywhere. Everything's gone to hell.
We're searching for gasoline. Belorechyansk, January 2nd. The only station with fuel. Hope there's enough and we make it through. Been waiting an hour.
There's a real apocalypse happening in Kamchatka too. Whole apartment buildings are literally being buried in snow. What are the authorities doing at this time? It's a mystery. They're not even trying to save people.
As for the residents of the Sanctions, I don't even know if they're lucky or not. But at least they won't have to make any extra effort to get home. All they have to do is sit down on their butts and slide down. On their feet or their butts, to be precise. And there you are. What does it look like from the inside? A little hall. It's just a snowy prison for people. It's as if getting into the building isn't a problem at all. But climbing up that hill, well, sliding down on your butt is easy. Damn, that's it. True and total freedom.
War, even if not always directly, gradually destroys the lives of ordinary people, even in the most remote regions. Sometimes
It's not explosions, not sabotage, not drones. This story is connected to the fact that people from all sorts of service organizations like housing maintenance offices, emergency services, and so on were actively recruited to go to war. Many regions reported a critical shortage of personnel in such organizations. This leads to both the proper functioning of such infrastructure not being ensured and emergency repairs being carried out with significant delays. All of this is directly related to the war.
how many billions over the past 4 years could have been invested in the well-being of citizens? But the Russian dictator wants to spend money not on improving the lives of his own country's residents, but on killing people in another country.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom, support independent Ukrainian journalism, so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it, so more people can see it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. A direct military clash between Russia and NATO within the next 2 to 3 years. This is a scenario currently being considered in Germany, where defense systems are already being adapted to such a development. According to the Times, in the event of large-scale Russian aggression, German troops could find themselves at the center of hostilities from the very first hours. Germany's healthcare system could also face a critical overload. At the same time, the publication notes that a significant part of society and the business community still does not fully understand the scale of the potential threat. One could assume that real awareness of this threat would increase pressure on the Kremlin, because it is better to use sanctions now than tanks later. But there is another problem. Sanctions must not only exist, they must be enforced. Because strangely enough, sanctioned goods are still freely entering Russia from the European Union. Journalists from Bild uncovered a Russian shadow mail network operating right in the heart of Germany. Details in the report.
Despite strict sanctions, banned goods are easily making their way from Germany to Russia. This was reported by Bild. After their months-long investigation, journalists uncovered a likely parcel smuggling network operating in the very heart of Germany. To uncover Putin's shadow mail network, journalists used GPS trackers to follow the route of parcels sent through a network linked to former employees of a Russian Post subsidiary in Germany. But let's start from the beginning. Bild discovered that a logistics company registered at the end of 2022 plays a key role in the scheme. Officially, it only has a mailbox in Cologne, but in reality, parcels are brought to a warehouse near Berlin, from where trucks head to Russia via Poland and Belarus.
Journalists from Bild used GPS trackers to trace the route of parcels sent through a network connected to former employees of a Russian Post subsidiary in Germany. We're talking about hundreds of tons of shipments that are regularly sent to Moscow.
The journalists sent 5 test parcels containing unusable sanctioned electronic components, declared as harmless items. The contents of the parcels were listed as books, scarves, and hats. The shipping cost is 26 euros for a package weighing up to 2 kilograms.
Notably, Uzbekistan Post documents were used to send cargo despite lacking operating rights in Germany. German authorities are investigating potential legal violations.
As journalists discovered, the route of the parcels is always the same: Berlin, Poland, Belarus, Moscow. Packages with hidden tracking devices crossed EU borders near Belarusian Brest almost without any obstacles. All the GPS devices eventually reported the same result: the arrival in Moscow. In response to a request from Bild, the logistics company stated that their control mechanisms are designed in such a way that violating EU sanctions is virtually impossible. But they added that they are not protected against false statements. Additionally, the Bild investigation reports that a car belonging to Dmitry V, the former managing director of Ruspost GmbH, is regularly parked behind the company's warehouse. In 2014, Russian Post tasked him with establishing a subsidiary in Berlin, and although he officially resigned after the start of the full-scale invasion, the Bild investigation confirms that he is currently running this logistics company that ships cargo to Russia.
The existence of certain channels through which sanctioned goods from the European Union end up in Russia is not news to anyone. Unfortunately, Ukraine regularly receives evidence confirming this after every shelling of its territory. When Ukrainian specialists examine the debris of missiles and drones, they invariably find a large number of components from the European Union. In other words, despite all the restrictions, as practice shows, the Russians are able to obtain everything they need without much trouble or effort.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly stated that the Russian military-industrial complex is critically dependent on the import of foreign components, without which the production of missiles and drones is virtually impossible. According to him, this is not about individual types of weapons, but about the entire system of Russian weapons production, which relies on components that Russia is unable to manufacture on its own.
Russian missiles are produced only because there are schemes to circumvent sanctions. That is true. Everyone can see how Russia is now trying to drive Ukrainians, our people, into a cold death with outdoor temperatures at -20 degrees Celsius. But the Russians would not be able to make a single ballistic or cruise missile without critical components from other countries. And it's not just China. Russia receives components from companies in Europe, the United States, and Taiwan.
During one of his recent speeches at the Davos Forum, where he emphasized that, in fact, the sanctions mechanisms are being circumvented, Russia is getting everything it needs, and this is a very big problem. Theoretically, the sanctions mechanism was supposed to deprive Russia of the means to continue the war, and thus push it toward ending this very war.
But in reality, things turned out to be quite different. Sanctions against Russia are absolutely not working as they were supposed to.
In reality, Russia continues to trade oil, continues to earn money, and with that money, it calmly buys everything it needs in a number of countries that have formally declared sanctions against Russia. And in this way, the whole system operates, and as a result, Russia is able to continue shelling Ukraine, destroying Ukrainian infrastructure, and creating a humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine. And in fact, this is the price of it all. This is the price of the fact that no one in Europe is seriously dealing with sanctions.
Political scientist Petro Olszczuk explains why all of this is happening this way. And unfortunately, these reasons are obvious.
They are not dealing with it for one simple reason, because trading with Russia is profitable for many representatives of European business. Well, that's exactly what they're doing, in fact.
Now to events that could have a global impact. We are talking about China. According to available information, Xi Jinping may have faced an attempted challenge from his own generals. As a result, so-called purges are now underway within China's military leadership. How could events in China affect Russia's war against Ukraine? The answer in the report.
Xi Jinping is purging the ranks of his top military leadership, who are suspected of attempting a coup and trying to overthrow Xi himself. China is witnessing one of the largest and most alarming anti-corruption campaigns during Xi Jinping's entire time in power.
There are actually a lot of factors involved: the military, nuclear weapons, and the alleged transfer of information to the United States, which is exactly what Xi Jinping's right-hand man on military matters and his colleagues in the military hierarchy are being accused of.
People from the innermost circle of the PRC leader, who betrayed him, have come under fire.
Such a story, these kinds of exposures within the top military political leadership of China could play a cruel trick on the Russian Federation and, in fact, on its relationship with Putin.
At the center of the investigation is Colonel General Zhang Youxia, vice chairman of the Central Military Commission and one of Xi's oldest allies. He was a figure of immense authority, whose name for years was seen as a symbol of stability and support. Now, however, Zhang has become a potential source of threat. The Ministry of Defense of the PRC suspects Zhang Youxia of violating discipline and the law, in other words, of corruption.
Chinese security services have already arrived, confiscated mobile phones, and are now thoroughly investigating their communications and contacts for signs of, once again, possible treason against the state, perhaps by a group of military personnel.
General Liu Xinli, chief of the Joint Staff Department of the PLA, who is responsible for operational planning, intelligence, logistics, and combat training of the Chinese army, has also come under investigation. He was a friend of Xi Jinping's family.
Back during the Civil War, their fathers fought side by side. And, in fact, this man belonged to what was called in China the caste of untouchables, the so-called princes.
General Liu Xinli is a key figure in military administration. His department plays an important role in the Ministry of Defense, from operational planning to preparing for potential wars.
There was the issue of Taiwan, as well as the matter of geopolitical, geostrategic confrontation with the main opponent, the United States of America.
Since October 2025, at least 9 generals have lost their positions. If Zhang Youxia is officially dismissed, he will become the highest-ranking active military officer removed by Xi during his entire time in power.
There was information circulating about China's nuclear program, how extensive it is, the pace of nuclear missile production, and what arsenals are currently actually present in China. And what was being passed on was, above all, information to the United States of America. An interesting and rather spicy detail is that the last time Zhang Youxia was seen was during public negotiations back in November 2025 in Moscow, in the Russian Federation. The negotiations were with his, essentially, counterpart, Russia's Minister of Defense.
The traitor could also lose his seat in the Politburo. This would be an unprecedented case for a single 5-year power cycle.
So, Xi Jinping's right-hand man on military matters, and let's put it this way, since the Vietnam War he has been closely cooperating, even back then, with the Soviet Union. In other words, there are still connections dating back to the Soviet Union.
According to experts, what is happening may not only be a possible preparation for an invasion of Taiwan, but also a tough internal consolidation. The leader of the PRC understands that an uncontrollable army could turn against him.
Such a significant scandal is also layered onto, let's say, a certain growing sense of disloyalty among the military ranks. Break time equals 0.5s/, or at the very least some of them. Break time equals 0.5s/, who are now increasingly voicing the urgent need for a more aggressive foreign policy for China. Break time equals 0.5s. / in sharper terms than we have seen before.
Notably, the purge has also affected officers responsible for the Taiwan direction. Xi Jinping realized that, due to corruption at the local level, his army is not ready for a large-scale operation against the island. For Ukraine, these processes are not direct, but they are strategically important. China is also a neutrally pro-Russian player, which, although not openly, supports the Kremlin both economically and diplomatically.
Of course, they will be more cautious, and just as there was no talk of military support before, there won't be any now. It is even possible that China will draw certain conclusions regarding the supply of dual-use goods. They will supply them, and perhaps make the logistics more complicated, so that China cannot be directly accused of supporting the Russian Federation.
Xi Jinping no longer trusts Putin. Now, large-scale purges, managerial chaos, and delays in military modernization are temporarily weakening Beijing as a potential rear base for Putin's Russia during the war with Ukraine.
We have developed a unique relationship with China.
This is a bad sign for Putin. He understands that he is losing an ally to whom he has bowed for all these years.
And now Russia's share is fourth in China's trade turnover. You see, this matters to everyone.
Against this backdrop, Moscow will lose support during an already difficult and crisis-ridden period related to the war.
And finally, about the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The Nazis shot, gassed, tortured and murdered millions of innocent children, women and men. They were killed for one reason only, because they were Jews. We must remember those horrific times, so that such crimes are never repeated again. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.